The Jordan Show on YouTube.
Today we're doing a deep dive into the world of blockchain.
Oh, yeah.
But not talking about crypto mining or NFTs.
Yeah.
Instead, we're going to be exploring blockchain as like the foundation for a new era of digital trust. We can kind of think of it like the digital DNA of the internet.
I like that.
Yeah. And so
Yeah, it's a good analogy.
we'll be unpacking how this works, why it matters, and we'll even be exploring 2 real-world case studies.
Okay.
So we'll be talking about IBM Food Trust, and we'll also be talking about Estonia's groundbreaking digital identity system.
Sounds good. It's such a fascinating topic, and especially when you consider how much we rely on these digital systems for basically everything these days.
Right.
I mean, blockchain really has the potential to fundamentally change how we think about things like data security and transparency in our digital world.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah.
So to kind of kick things off, what exactly is blockchain?
Yeah.
And how does this whole digital DNA thing actually work?
Yeah, so imagine you have this digital ledger, right? A record of transactions. But instead of being kept in one place, like on one central server, it's distributed across a whole network of computers.
Interesting.
And each block in the chain, it contains a batch of these transactions, a timestamp, and then a unique cryptographic hash, kind of like a fingerprint
Okay.
that links it to the block that came before it.
So it's not just like one file like sitting on a server somewhere.
Exactly, it's really spread out.
Gotcha.
And because it's decentralized like this and every change is linked to the one before it, if you wanted to tamper with the blockchain, like alter any information on it,
Yeah.
you would have to hack a huge portion of the network at the same time,
Wow.
which is basically impossible.
So it's really secure.
Yeah, incredibly secure.
Okay, so we've talked about kind of how it works on this technical level, but I'm
Yeah.
curious, like, how does this translate into real-world applications?
Oh yeah, for sure. So there's this really interesting example, IBM Food Trust.
Okay.
They're using blockchain to track food products
Okay.
from farm to supermarket shelves.
So like the whole chain.
The whole thing.
Okay.
So imagine there's a contamination scare.
Yeah.
With blockchain, retailers like Walmart, they can trace the origin of a specific batch of anything, like lettuce, in just seconds.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that means you can pinpoint the source of the problem really quickly
Yeah.
and have a much more effective response.
Yeah, that seems like it could prevent large-scale outbreaks and also recalls.
For sure.
But is there any downside to that? Like, is there a risk of too much transparency?
Yeah, that's a good point. Transparency is generally a good thing when it comes to food safety.
Yeah.
But you also have to think about the potential for exposing sensitive business information.
Oh, like what?
You know, things like supplier networks, pricing strategies.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So finding the right balance between transparency and privacy
Right.
is a really important challenge when you're implementing blockchain technology.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to see how this technology can impact something as fundamental as our food supply chain. But I'm also curious to see how blockchain can actually empower individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's shift gears and talk about Estonia.
Okay.
They have this really fascinating digital identity system. They've basically built their whole national identity system on blockchain.
Wow.
Citizens can vote, they can access their healthcare records, they can start businesses, all through this secure digital ID.
So it's like a single digital key
Kind of,
that can unlock all these different services. But how does that differ from like a centralized government database?
Yeah, good question. I think the key difference here is control.
Oh, okay.
So in Estonia's system, the citizens actually own and control their data.
Okay.
They can choose what information to share and who to share it with.
Gotcha.
So it really puts individuals back in the driver's seat when it comes to their digital identities.
So it's not just about security then.
No.
It's about personal empowerment as well. Wow, that's pretty revolutionary.
It is.
But doesn't this create like new vulnerabilities? Like what if the whole system goes down?
Yeah, that's something to think about.
Or like what if someone loses their digital key?
Yeah, those are definitely valid concerns. I think Estonia has done a good job of building in redundancy and recovery mechanisms to make sure the system is resilient.
Okay.
And the fact that blockchain is decentralized actually makes it much more resistant to widespread outages compared to your typical centralized systems.
Okay, so we've talked about how blockchain can ensure data integrity.
Right.
We've talked about how it can empower individuals. But I keep hearing all this buzz about smart contracts, like how they're going to revolutionize how we make agreements
Yeah.
and transactions. So what exactly are they?
Yeah.
And how do they actually work?
So a smart contract is basically a self-executing agreement
Okay.
that's written in computer code and then stored on the blockchain.
Correct.
So let's say you're renting an apartment.
Yeah.
The smart contract could automatically release your security deposit back to you
Okay.
once you fulfilled all the terms of the lease.
Gotcha.
You wouldn't need a middleman or anything.
Okay.
And it helps avoid potential disputes.
So it basically takes the human element and potential for error out of the equation.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's pretty impressive.
And because it's all transparent on the blockchain,
Right.
there's a higher level of trust and accountability built into the system.
This is all really fascinating. But I have to admit, it's a lot to wrap my head around.
I can understand that. Maybe we could take a step back and kind of revisit that digital DNA analogy again.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe that will help clarify some of these complex concepts.
That sounds good to me. All right, so
Yeah.
let's revisit this whole digital DNA thing. It's a catchy comparison, but is there actually a deeper connection between blockchain and, like, the literal building blocks of life?
Oh, there's definitely more to it than just a metaphor. So think about how DNA replicates itself to ensure that all the genetic information gets passed down accurately through the generations.
Okay.
Blockchain actually works in a similar way.
Interesting.
So every time a new block of transactions is added,
Yeah.
that information gets replicated across the entire network.
Okay.
And that creates this like synchronized and tamper-proof record.
So it's like a built-in safeguard
Yeah.
to prevent data corruption.
Yeah.
Just like how our bodies have ways to repair errors in our own DNA.
Exactly. Both DNA and blockchain, they have these self-correcting mechanisms. So in like biological systems, we have enzymes that scan and repair DNA damage.
Right.
But in blockchain, we have what are called consensus algorithms.
Oh, okay.
And those act as like the guardians of the network.
Yeah.
They're constantly verifying transactions and making sure that everyone is playing by the rules.
Okay.
So if someone tries to mess with the data or tamper with it, these algorithms will flag it.
Okay.
And the network will reject the change.
That's pretty cool. So this constant verification process sounds really impressive, but how does it actually work, like, in practice?
Yeah.
Are we talking about some kind of supercomputer that's constantly monitoring the blockchain?
Not exactly. It's actually a lot more distributed than that.
Okay.
So remember, the blockchain is spread out across this whole network of computers.
Right.
Each one of these computers is called a node.
Okay.
And they all participate in this verification process. Now, different blockchains, they might use different consensus algorithms.
Okay.
But the main idea is the same.
Gotcha.
The majority of the nodes have to agree that a transaction is legitimate
Okay.
before it can be added to the blockchain.
Sounds like a democratic voting system for data.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
And that's one of the things that makes blockchain so resilient, because there's no single point of failure.
Right.
Even if some of the nodes go offline or something happens to them,
Yeah.
the network as a whole can keep on going.
All right, so we've talked about how DNA and blockchain are both really good at replicating and protecting information. But we also know that DNA can evolve over time through things like mutations. So does blockchain have that same capacity for evolution?
Absolutely. Just like DNA, blockchain technology is constantly evolving.
Okay.
So developers, they're always working on new improvements.
Like what?
You know, things like scaling solutions to handle way more transactions
Okay.
or enhanced privacy features.
Gotcha.
And also these things called interoperability protocols that allow different blockchains to talk to each other.
Oh, wow. So it's not a static technology. It's
Yeah.
really adapting and changing as we speak.
Yeah, it really is. It's actually one of the most dynamic areas in technology right now.
That's cool.
Just like those genetic variations that lead to the diversity and resilience of life here on Earth.
Yeah.
These innovations in blockchain are kind of paving the way for this more secure, transparent, and interconnected digital future.
This is all incredibly exciting. But are there any potential downsides or risks that we should be aware of? With blockchain evolving so rapidly, like, could all these advancements create some unintended consequences?
That's a really important question. I think just like any new technology, there's always some potential risks.
Right.
So for example, if you start developing more complex smart contracts,
Yeah.
that could actually lead to new vulnerabilities that we haven't even thought about yet, or
Right.
like loopholes. And as all these different blockchains start becoming more interconnected,
Right.
that raises concerns about potential systemic risks if one of the major platforms were to fail.
Right. So while blockchain has undeniable potential, we should also approach it with a healthy dose of caution and critical thinking.
Exactly. I think it's super important to have open and honest conversations about both the potential benefits and the risks of this technology as it continues to evolve.
For sure.
And we need to make sure that its development and implementation are guided by ethical considerations and a real focus on societal well-being.
Well said.
Yeah.
It seems like we're only scratching the surface of what's possible with this technology. So where do you think blockchain is headed in the next 5 to 10 years? What are some of the most exciting areas of development that you're keeping an eye on?
Oh man, there's so many. I think one area that I find particularly fascinating is this convergence of blockchain with artificial intelligence.
AI.
Yeah, AI. So like imagine AI algorithms that can analyze huge amounts of data that are securely stored on the blockchain.
Wow.
That could lead to some major breakthroughs in fields like healthcare, finance, and even scientific research.
That sounds like it could have a really profound impact on how we live and work. What about the potential for blockchain to create like new forms of governance or even challenge existing power structures?
Well, we're already seeing some of that happening with the rise of these things called decentralized autonomous organizations.
DAOs.
DAOs. These are organizations that are run entirely on the blockchain, and they use smart contracts to automate decision making and get rid of the need for these traditional hierarchies.
That's interesting.
It's a pretty radical concept.
Yeah.
But it has a lot of potential to disrupt industries and empower communities in ways that we've never seen before.
This has been a really eye-opening conversation. I'm walking away with a much deeper understanding of not just how blockchain works, but also its potential to shape the future.
Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground today, from like the technical details of blockchain to its real-world applications, and we even took a peek into its potential future.
Yeah, and it all comes back to that initial analogy of blockchain as digital DNA. You know, it's not just about the technology itself. It's about building systems that are as trustworthy and resilient as like the very building blocks of life.
That's a great way to put it. But for our listeners who might be feeling a bit overwhelmed with all this information, what's like the one key takeaway that you'd want them to remember?
That's a good question. I say it's this. Blockchain is fundamentally changing how we think about trust.
In this digital age. It's about moving away from centralized authorities and towards more decentralized and transparent systems where everyone has access to the same information and can verify its authenticity.
And we've seen how that works in real life, right?
Yeah.
With IBM Food Trust making food safer and Estonia giving citizens more control over their digital identities.
Absolutely. These examples show us that blockchain is already making a real difference.
Yeah.
And as the technology continues to mature, I think we can expect even more innovative applications to pop up.
Like what?
Well, everything from supply chain management and healthcare to like voting systems and even new forms of digital art and collectibles.
It sounds like we're really at the beginning of a major shift in technology.
Yeah.
One that could have as big of an impact as the internet itself.
I think that's a pretty fair assessment. Blockchain really has the potential to like disrupt industries, empower people, and maybe even change how we interact with each other and with our governments.
Yeah.
It's definitely an exciting time to be following this space.
For sure.
And I encourage everyone to just stay curious and keep learning about it.
So for those who want to delve deeper, where would you recommend they go? Are there any specific resources or anything that you would suggest?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of information online these days. There's some really great websites and blogs out there dedicated to blockchain technology. That would be a good place to start. And then for people who prefer a more structured way to learn, there's some excellent online courses and videos available too. And, you know, don't underestimate the value of just exploring real-world case studies. Because seeing how blockchain is being used in action can really make things click.
Yeah, for sure. And this is a field that's constantly evolving, so it's important to stay curious, keep learning, and who knows, you might just be the one to come up with the next groundbreaking blockchain application.
Absolutely. I think the future of blockchain is full of possibilities.
Yeah.
And it's really up to all of us to shape it in a way that benefits society as a whole.
Well, that's an inspiring thought to end on. Thanks for joining us today for this deep dive into the world of blockchain. We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration of, well, the frontiers of knowledge.